Hi Joanne, hope you're doing well. I see you've gone about this assignment using some miniature figures, as many of your peers have, so we'll look at that. The first thing I wanted to talk about was your lighting setup. And a couple things I wanted to point out. One is that when you're working small, uh, and work static objects, you should use a tripod, and you should also get your lights much closer. So I'm looking at this light where it looks like this is your tabletop setup, and your light is probably about 8 feet away. So, and I'm looking at you're shooting these at 1/25th of a second, f6.3. And so basically, when you're shooting so close, you want to have better depth of field because the closer you are to with a stronger lens, the more shallow the depth of field. And so, excuse me, sometimes that can be convenient, other times not so much. So the way you can help that is by getting your light closer. So this light could be much, much closer, down like right in this area right here. See if I can. So right around here is where your light could be that close. You don't need to be that far up. And then you bring it with your camera right in close. That allows you to work with a very small depth of field. This image over here is a little bit better. You've got your a direct light, and it's down closer. It could even be closer than that though, because you're look how much of the image you're capturing here. So you can come in much tighter. That just gives you more control over the light and your aperture, which I think is important. You're shooting these at 6400, and you've got plenty of light, so it's just that you're too far away. So there'd be no need to do that. You can come in right nice and tight. Now your Arto ones use sort of a cloudy, open shade light, and it worked out pretty well for you. I think it gave you some nice depth to the figures. The light wraps around it, wraps around the figures nicely. Um, one of the things when you're working small scale is that you have to pay attention to the other objects that you're using to try to bring them into scale. So for example, using looks like boards or from a deck, the wood maintains its natural scale, so it makes all these continue to look like miniatures. That's one, in this assignment, that's one thing to address. Over here, because you did the close-up of the car, you remove the context and it looks much more like we lose the sense that it's a small scale object. I'm not sure what your concept was. I said it in the post, you just mentioned that you were put some soldiers and cars and animals together. And so I'm just curious what your concept was. It would be nice if you would have stated that. I'm seeing quite a variety of just different poses with the figurines and the cards. I'm not really figuring out what the purpose is. Now, when you shoot indoors and you line up the cars like this, I'm getting a little more of a concept that you're looking at the design of the car or creating kind of a staged, like advertisement of the car. Again, here you have, in these shots, you've got the same problem with the wood grain, and that the grain then makes the car look small. So one of the things we're trying to do with miniatures is get past that, trying to create an illusion of, remove the issue of scale from the topic. In these, you're successful at that because you remove enough information that we can no longer see the size of the car. Um, or, of course, another aspect would be to create a concept. In this one, you sort of have the idea of, almost from movies, of like a bunch of kids hanging out in the car and going out driving. Um, so that can work. In this lighting setup, we have the same issue that you've got before. Your lights are just too far away from your main topic. And again, I think what this caused is it made you shoot at a high ISO and with more open aperture than you would want. And so bringing the light in tighter, using a tripod. I mean, you could really shoot these images at 1 or 2 seconds. You really wouldn't need to. So even with the light high up, if you use a tripod to shoot these, um, then you would be able to shoot at a very low shutter speed. So that's something you think about um, when you're not having to move around. In other words, when you don't have to hand hold the camera because of your movement, then use a tripod and you can really slow down the shutter speed. Okay, let's take a look at the ones that you selected. I think this first image actually is your strongest, and it does a couple things. First of all, it removes the issue of scale. We see the car looks like it's caught in action coming over a bump in the road, and it's nice and sharp in the front. The lighting looks appropriate. It's basically a soft, very soft diffuse light, so don't have any hard shadows. Everything is sharpened and focused. It needs to be in focus. Here we have a similar idea. We've got could be shot out of a fantasy dinosaur movie, I guess, but your main figure should be sharp, and or the dinosaur is soft, whereas your focus starts here. So that's one thing to watch, is trying to get that main figure in focus. What I do like in this one, in both 1 and 2, are your use of composition very well done. I think the third one, the weakness is the composition. This figure is exactly in the middle. If we split your frame in half, um, is right in the middle. So you want to avoid that. That basically leaves a lot of open space over here that unbalances the photograph. So if you say set this up more like this, right? So he's more off center. Now we still get a sense of depth and dimension, but more compositionally more dynamic. In this one, I get the idea that we have these soldiers kind of have captured these animals. So here I have a stronger. I mean, in the three that you chose, I think I see a concept. In your approach, I didn't really see a concept, but in your final three choices, I do see a connection in each case that creates. There's a reason behind the photograph. And I think that's important. Okay, Joanne. So main thing is to good documentation of your light setup. That was very helpful, actually. And then be sure to use up all your space. In other words, um, you've got an isolated frame where you're shooting. Bring your lights right up to the edge of that frame.